in less than 1 week, we will pick the next Speaker of the Texas House. A lot of moving parts, a lot of courageous conservatives working across the state to make sure Republicans know what's going on. And it's truly remarkable to see just how many Republicans are aware that something is happening. It's a very encouraging time. Let's get to the show. On Monday of this week, I had the opportunity to spend time in Fort Worth with over 400 patriots who came out with less than a week notice over the Christmas holiday break. Just said, hey, next week, Attorney General Ken Paxton, Abraham, George are coming to town. If any of y'all want to come, we're going to talk about what's going on with this speaker's race in the Texas House. And over 400 people came to the Tarrant County GOP headquarters to have their voices heard and to make it clear that they want reform and a united Republican front in the Texas House of Representatives. We then flew to Tyler, where we had another fantastic event with Grassroots America, We the People, the Republican Party of Texas, there with Chairman George, Joanne Fleming, of course, Attorney General Ken Paxton, Kristen Bentley, who serves on the SREC, Representatives Brent Money, Tony Tinderholt, addressing an overflowing crowd, probably over 300 people, again, with less than a week notice. Just, hey, do you want to come out? It was freezing cold that night. Depending on when you're listening to this, I think Thursday, East Texas and North Texas is going to get hit with some snow. These people were excited, some of them having driven from an hour and a half, who live in Jay Dean's district or Cole Hefner's district, Cody Harris's district. I met someone who listens to the show regularly from Palestine or however they all call it there, and just said, hey, I've already reached out to Cody Harris's office. I've already lodged my position. Very encouraging to hear. One thing you can really observe is that the small group of Republicans who are with Dustin Burrows trying to cut this deal with a majority Democrat coalition are on major defense. They're having to post responses. They're having to show up to their local CEC meetings and beg Republicans to not vote against them, let them cut this deal. They're posting different comments. One of the new recent talking points that they've put together, it's really funny because you know some of the different actors on their side coming up with all these talking points, but they've decided, we're going to say Dustin Burrows is the conservative rural choice for speaker, and that David Cook is the more liberal urban choice for speaker. The urban choice, not the rural choice. And so Cody Harris and Stan Gertis and all these people are posting, I'm with the rural conservative state representative. It's really fascinating because if you look at the Democrats who make up a majority of Dustin Burrows' coalition, they're all very urban Democrats representing these very urban areas. Why? Because they want somebody who's going to help them kill as much Republican policy as possible. Anyways, I will say that in conversations with a number of all of these conservative Republican lawmakers, and remember, David Cook has 68% of the Republican caucus on board. When you talk to them, their phones are not blowing up. They're not on defense. They're not trying to figure out what statement to put out to justify their position. Why? Because they're Republicans supporting the Republican nominee. I recently saw a news story from Minnesota. If y'all have followed Minnesota, there were 67 Republicans and 67 Democrats elected to represent the state house in Minnesota. And then a court ruling found that one of the 67 Democrats that got elected doesn't live in his district. So he can't swear in and take office. So now it's 67 Republicans and 66 Democrats. I could break this down, but the best thing to do is just to go to this news story. So let's go to the story.
But tensions are already high, with Democrats threatening to not show up on day one, as we first told you last night. All this means a bumpy start ahead. Our Caroline Cummings is at the Capitol with the latest, and she joins us now. So, Caroline, we're still waiting on a key court ruling, right?
Yeah, that's right, Amelia. So we checked today, and there is still no ruling from a judge in the election challenge to DFL Representative Brad Tabke's narrow victory in a Shakopee House race. Republicans want a new election because of missing ballots at the center of the case. And the judge's decision, which is expected this week, could throw another wrench in what's already a complicated session unlike any other. The Speaker of the Minnesota House is a powerful position governing how the chamber operates. It's why who should hold the gavel is sparking fierce debate.
A majority is 68 members. Neither caucus has a majority.
The chamber was headed for a 67-67 tie after the November election. Leaders promised a power-sharing agreement so lawmakers could do the work of their constituents. But bipartisanship blew up following a judge's ruling barring a Roseville area Democrat from taking office because he didn't live in the district as required by law. At least for now, Republicans have a one-seat edge. Newfound power, they say, they intend to use.
When we are not tied, there's no need for a power-sharing agreement.
Now, the partisan tug-of-war centers on quorum, or the minimum number of lawmakers required to get anything done. The state constitution says a majority of each house constitutes a quorum to transact business. Democrats believe the magic number is 68, even with one lawmaker not seated. So if they don't show up on the first day, Republicans' plans to elect a GOP speaker are a bust.
What the Republicans are engaged in is an illegitimate power grab, and we're not going to stand by and just let them do it.
How does this kind of dispute, this power dispute that's happening right now, instill confidence in Minnesotans that any of you guys can do your jobs effectively?
We can do our jobs effectively when we show up and actually get to work. I understand that the Democrats are upset that they lost a seat because of a candidate that lied. I understand the frustration. If it was flipped, I would be frustrated too. I would also recognize common sense math that said 66 is less than 67.
I love the Republican leader, the Republican speaker designee there, who says, I understand if I was the Democrats, I would be upset too that I have 66 and they have 67. But I would also understand the math that 67 is more than 66. Imagine that. Republicans who actually believe that if there are more Republicans than Democrats, then Republicans together should pick a Republican speaker. That is the mindset in the Republican legislatures across the country, but not in Texas. And that is the message that was being delivered to so many of these Texans that live in many of these districts of Republicans who are selling them out by Attorney General Paxton. I'm just going to go to this, one of the stories that came out during the tour that I was really excited to be involved with. Let's go.
Well, one of the highest profile Texas Republicans in Austin weighed in today on the increasingly bitter fight for Speaker in this state. And today, Attorney General Ken Paxton voiced his support for one of the leading Republicans in the race. And he also, at the same time, had a warning for others in the House GOP. Let's wander through all of it. Ion Politics reporter Jack Fink is here with what Paxton had to say. Jack?
Well, Doug, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton launched a statewide tour today in Fort Worth to help Representative David Cook win the Speaker's gavel. The Speaker is the third most powerful position at the Capitol and can influence which bills pass or die. And Paxton said House Republicans need to unite behind Cook or face being primaried next year. Before a standing room only crowd at Tarrant County Republican Party headquarters, Attorney General Ken Paxton and Texas GOP Chairman Abraham George said Texas House Republicans should back Representative David Cook of Mansfield for Speaker because he won support from the House GOP caucus last month over Representative Dustin Burrows of Lubbock. Paxton told reporters grassroots Republicans want conservatives leading the House, and they don't want what he called moderate Republicans joining Democrats to select a speaker.
If the speakership is controlled by a block of Democratic votes, which it has been since Joe Strauss, it prevents Republicans who are elected to get certain things done from getting their priorities done. And that's been happening for the last 16 years. And this is, I think, the first time we really had a chance to expose that.
A number of House Republicans joined Paxton and George. They said they're hoping veteran state representatives from Tarrant County, Charlie Guerin and Giovanni Capriglione, and John McQueenie, an incoming freshman, will will change their minds and back Cook over Burrows. Capriglione says he's not changing his mind, saying in a statement, quote, his proven leadership and unwavering commitment to our shared conservative values will ensure that the priorities of our constituents will be implemented. Representative Carl Tepper, a friend and supporter of Burrows, told me that he is more conservative than Cook.
I reject the premise that it's another, rebel forces of uber conservatives trying to get control of the Texas House. Is actually just the opposite. I'm standing with a group of Republicans who are trying to get the conservative guy in to lead the House.
Sure. But if Burrows becomes Speaker, Paxton and George have a warning for Republicans who back Burrows.
If they don't listen, we are going to come back and primary them next time and beat them.
It is something we may end up having to do if that's what it takes to get our House in the order.
And Representative Tepper told me last month he's unfazed by that threat. Representative-elect John McQueenie declined comment, and I didn't hear back from Representative Charlie Guerin. The full Texas House votes for Speaker next Tuesday, the first day of the legislative session. And we will be there, Doug.
That wasn't the only story covered. Just to be clear, there were stations in Austin, stations in Tyler. There were multiple stations in DFW. This thing trended on Twitter for the day. When I got on Twitter, it said trending topics, Ken Paxton, barnstorming Texas. Here's just one more story of the coverage of the time that Attorney General Paxton was on the trail.
Attorney General Ken Paxton. To an overflow crowd of Tarrant County Republicans, Attorney General Ken Paxton warns politicians of their own party are working to undermine them.
These guys need to listen to you.
Paxton says the Republicans set to vote for a more moderate Speaker of the House will hamper efforts to pass the party's agenda.
And if we can't change the Texas House, we can't get our priorities done.
It's years-long tradition for Texas Republicans to work with Democrats to elect a more moderate Republican as House Speaker.
That's something that Paxton wants to put an end to. He doesn't want to see that continue.
SMU political science professor Matthew Wilson says Paxton's statewide push for a more conservative speaker is meant to send a message
that there are political consequences for defying the conservative powers that be within the Republican Party.
Paxton denies he's making a threat.
Sir, is this an intimidation tour across the state?
I mean, that's a good media term. No, it's about the people. I mean, they elected these Republicans to do certain things, and they need to be accountable for that. And all we're doing is talking about it transparently.
But he told the crowd what happens if the state reps don't listen.
We are going to come back and primary them next time and beat them. God bless you. Thank you for everything you've done.
We reached out to all three North Texas Republicans Mr. Paxton called out by name, only heard back from one, State Representative Charlie Guerin, who said he didn't have anything to say about this, but added he's, quote, sorry, the Attorney General doesn't have more to do. The legislative session kicks off in just over a week, and the Speaker's race is expected to come to a head next Tuesday.
Again, I think it's pretty clear why Republicans who are supporting David Cook aren't on defense, right? Because they're supporting the Republican nominee who Republicans came together and chose in accordance with their caucus bylaws. Greg Abbott said this. He said we should elect a Republican with the majority of Republicans in accordance with the caucus bylaws. Dan Patrick has put out multiple statements on this issue, really bringing clarity to Texans. I can tell you, I was looking at one poll recently that was in one of these state house districts that is a Republican state representative who's supporting Dustin Burrows, right? And this question was asked of the Republican primary voters. Are you aware that there is currently a battle going on for Speaker of the Texas House? And this is just your average Republican primary voter, right? Over 70% of the respondents said yes, they were aware that there was currently a battle going on for Speaker of the Texas House. That is an amazing number. Truly remarkable number. When we started these conversations about the importance of the position of Speaker of the Texas House, less than 10% of Republicans in Texas even knew who the Speaker might be, that the Speaker was significant, what the Speaker of the House even did. It was a small, minute number. Today, over 70% of Republicans right now, and that is before Ken Paxton went across the state. That is before all of our statewide officials started speaking loudly on this issue and clearly. It's really funny. I talk about how the Dustin Burrows team is on defense and I don't think there's any way they can get off of defense at this point. Representative Carl Tepper from Lubbock, in a conversation with Chris Salcedo, had this to say about the statewide Republicans' clear statements on the position of Speaker of the Texas House. Let's go to this clip of Representative Tepper and Chris Salcedo.
Okay. And so, again, the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, members of the Texas delegation to the United States House of Representatives, again, over 100 Republican chairs. Why are they wrong? Why do we need to have a Republican speaker who has Democrat buy-in? Why do we need that?
Let's do this. The governor and the lieutenant governor are susceptible to political pressure like the rest of us. As a matter of fact, they're paranoid about it. And so if they're hearing screaming from some of the grassroots, then, they'll probably make a loose statement or two about what they think should happen to take some of the interest off of them.
Truly remarkable. I'm going to tell you a couple very interesting things about Representative Tepper's comments after we just take a quick break.
News and analysis on what's happening in Texas. End your day with daily headlines from Texas Scorecard. Every day at 5 p.m., join me, Brandon Waltons, as we recap the biggest stories of the day and talk about why they matter to you. From the state capitol to town hall, there's no shortage of events happening. Keep up with it all. Watch and subscribe to Daily Headlines from Texas Scorecard.
Representative and former Chairman Matt Rinaldi, or former Representative and former Texas GOP Chair Matt Rinaldi, did a great job saying if you follow the Republicans supporting Dustin Burrows and their statements, it's very clear that they despise their own voters, which is so accurate. And it's actually gone beyond that. They even seem to have some type of disdain. I can't remember whether Matt used the word despise or disdain, so you can fact check me on that, but it was a D word, I believe. It's very clear that there's also this disdain for even their own Republican leaders who are taking a position against them. Carl Tepper's view of Governor Greg Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is, look, these guys are like paranoid. So they just tried to take the heat off them. I get it. The heat's on me. The heat's not on them. So they put these loose statements out. Let me be clear. Governor Abbott's statement was not loose. And they have to define these things so narrowly, because if Governor Abbott's statement is loose, then Carl Tepper has some wiggle room, right? I'm going to read what Governor Abbott posted. He said, "Let me be clear." Now, Governor Abbott did not say, "Let me be loose." So Dustin Burrows, I kind of mix up Dustin Burrows and Carl Tepper because they're sometimes kind of the same person. But Carl Tepper is sitting there, right? I don't know, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, put out these loose statements. Let's read a couple of the loose statements that have been put out by Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and Governor Greg Abbott. The Greg Abbott statement says, "Let me be loose? No. Let me be clear. I worked this entire year to elect conservative candidates who will pass conservative laws, including school choice. To achieve that goal, we need a Texas House Speaker chosen by a majority of Republicans in accordance with the Republican caucus rules." That's not loose. That is not a loose statement. Dan Patrick, following these comments of Carl Tepper, said this. And this is a bit of a lengthy statement, but I think it's really important. So I'm going to read this statement in its entirety. Dan Patrick said, "1 week from today, the Texas House will select a Republican speaker. The question is, will that speaker be selected by a few Republicans and a majority of Democrats? Or will that speaker be selected by the majority of Republicans and a few Democrats? Representative David Cook was nominated by the Republican caucus, fair and square. He has 57 Republicans who have pledged their votes to him. Representative Dustin Burrows, who walked out of the Republican caucus meeting with his supporters when he lost the vote, has just 31 Republicans pledged to him. It takes a simple majority of 76 votes to be elected Speaker of the 150 members. Since there are 88 Republicans, a reasonable person would expect 76 Republicans could come together and select a speaker. Unfortunately, for most of the last 15 years, there have been a dozen or so House Republicans who undermine the Republican Party by getting all or most of the Democrats to join them to pick a Republican who the Democrats can then control. That is what Dustin Burrows is doing. His Republican supporters make all kinds of excuses for why they are willing to cut this deal. The truth is, it's all just about them. They want power. They want important chairmanships for themselves and are willing to cast aside the expectations of the Texas Republicans who voted for them. Representative Carl Tepper, one of Burrows' supporters, said the following on radio this week. The governor and lieutenant governor are susceptible to political pressure like the rest of us. As a matter of fact, they are paranoid about it. And so, if they are hearing screaming from some of the grassroots, then they will probably make a loose statement or two about what they think should happen to take some of the interest off of them. In short, Representative Tepper, like all the supporters of Burrows, believes they are not accountable to their voters. I listen carefully to Texas voters. I just won my election by 900,000 votes because I do listen to voters. Governor Abbott and I clearly stated that we support the Republican caucus nominee. That is not Dustin Burrows. I do not support any Republican who is elected speaker by a few Republicans and a majority of Democrats. This has happened too much over the last 15 years and has killed conservative legislation time and time again. The result is that the conservative legislation that a majority of Texas voters support passes the Senate but is killed in the House. For the record, I don't care who the Republican speaker is as long as they win a large majority of Republicans. Any Republican who wins with a majority of Democrats will be a counterfeit speaker who will be beholden to the Democrats. As far as those who support Burrows, I'm glad they weren't with Travis at the Alamo when he drew the line in the sand. They would have crossed the line and walked out of the gate, leaving their fellow fighters behind. Again, contrast Minnesota Republicans with Texas Republicans. Isn't it crazy that Minnesota Republicans should be really glad that Carl Tepper doesn't live in Minnesota and isn't one of those Republicans, and that Dustin Burrows does not live in Minnesota. Because if Dustin Burrows and Carl Tepper and Cody Harris and Stan Gertis were Republican legislators from Minnesota, who knows what would be happening right now? You could have Speaker Burrows of the Minnesota legislature with his three buddies, Stan Gertis, Cody Harris, Carl Tepper, and the 66 Democrats by their side. That totals 70. And then they'd sit up in front of their Republicans and say, well, the math is 70 is more than 63. I guess we win. That is the deal they're trying to cut now. David Cook is the first Republican nominee we really have ever had. Now you might say, really, Luke? I thought we've had this Republican nomination process for multiple sessions. What are you talking about? Dennis Bonnen and Dade Phelan bypassed the Republican nomination process, okay? They had press conferences before the caucus ever met and said the race for speaker is over. Does that mean I'm waiting for the nomination? No. It means I have already secured the votes for speaker with Democrats and Republicans. They cut deals with Democrats before the Republican caucus ever met. They never wanted to take the risk of subjecting themselves to the caucus process and then having to figure out who the nominee would be, because that would cause a wrestling that would bring about a more unified Republican caucus. And you'd have to share power with Republicans you don't like. And so instead of doing that, they said, we're going to go find some Democrats to cut a deal with before the caucus ever meets. This was the first time they didn't think they could do that. So politically, they said, let's see if we can't kind of bully enough Republican members to go into the caucus and vote for us. And there are quite a few Republicans that are with Dustin Burrows that believe that Dustin Burrows will hate them if they are not with him. They're worried. And they walked in that room and voted with him out of fear. And they thought they had scared enough people, and they hadn't. And when they realized that we have not scared enough people to submit themselves to our reign, they left. They walked out. And that's when they said, I know it's going to be really politically painful, but we're going to go try to cut this deal with the Democrats. And they haven't gotten 76 votes yet, but they're trying to get there. They're trying to get there. So where does that leave us today? Today, we are at a moment in time where we are less than a week away from the election, and more Republican voters are aware than ever that for the first time, the Republican caucus got together and actually nominated a Republican nominee without some deal getting cut with Democrats beforehand. And now it has exposed this small group of Republicans. And I believe the group that currently is there, the 31 Republicans that Dan Patrick mentions, that a lot of other people have listed. These are the 31 Republicans that Burrows listed that have not taken their names off, because 7 of the 38 Republicans he listed said, I never gave him permission to put my name up there. I'm not with him. So he has 31. And I believe that many of those 31 are not actually with him. A lot of his Republican lieutenants will say this. They'll say, well, we know we have 14 or 15 or 16 ride or die Dustin people. This is something you'll hear kind of in private conversations. We know we have 14, 15, or 16 ride or die Dustin people. And what that means is that they know that half of their Republican supporters are sitting there going, I'm getting lambasted. It's not fun. I don't want to do this anymore. So where we end up today is that we have a clear path to a united Republican front. And we have a larger coalition of Republicans united than ever before. If you were to tell me 2 years ago, some of you who follow this program have followed this program for years. And I mean, I don't know. I don't even remember when we started. 5 years ago? More? I think it was more. It was a lot longer than that. I don't know how long this program has been going on, guys. I should check. I'm going to check while I'm talking, because I have zero clue how long I've been doing this. I know that sounds weird, but I don't even know. So if I go to videos here, 5 years, it looks like. 5 years ago. Okay. So some of you have been following this conversation for 5 years. It would be hard. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1 year ago, it would have been hard for me and you to say that we believe that going into this session, a week before the session, 68% of the Republican caucus, the governor and the lieutenant governor and the attorney general and most of our Republican members of Congress are all standing together saying we should be united this session. The Republican Party of Texas. It would be hard. If you were at the Republican State Convention in May, you would have thought that the Republican Party was not going to be this united in January. I was a strong supporter of Chairman Abraham George. I know many of you were, but I know actually quite a few of you weren't. I have friends that were not supportive of Abraham George, who campaigned against him. What I saw when I went on the road just for these 2 events, I didn't go on for Tuesday. I had a lot of work to do. And so I spent one day. I cannot tell you how many people I know over the last week who have said, I didn't vote for Abraham George, but I am so glad he's here. I am so glad he's willing to lead in this way. This is what I want my Republican Party doing, is pushing for unity in the Republican Party and holding Republicans accountable who are going to go cut deals with Democrats like this. I have never seen the SREC and the county chairs, everybody more unified. It's like 135 or 136 or 137. I don't know. It changes every day. It's in the 130 something of county chairmen who have said, we need to respect the caucus process. We need to support David Cook. We need to unite. All of these things. Those county chairs, some of them have done their own statement. Some of them passed their own resolution as a CC, and many of them signed on to Beau French's letter, which he led. When you combine all that, I think it represents like 75% of the Republican voters in Texas have a county chair saying this. And I'm telling you, a year or two ago, you would have never said it's just easy to get all these county chairs together because so many people were in so many different factions. Abraham George won the chairmanship by 54% of the vote. I don't remember what the percentage was. If any of y'all do, you can correct me. I don't remember exactly what the percentage was, but what I remember is that it was a contentious time during that convention. But I hope what you're encouraged by is just how unified Republicans are today. It's this tiny, tiny, tiny group of both Republican legislators, Republican Party leaders that are actually saying, no, I want to cut this deal with these Democrats. And Dan Patrick said it well. It's about power. It's about power. And it's so sad to watch and see and witness it go down like this. But I do have hope that in a week, Republicans will realize that we are stronger together than divided. We are stronger working together for our shared conservative principles than cutting a deal with a majority Democrat coalition. We have to stand strong. I'm looking forward to this race concluding. There will be a lot of other things we work on, but this is the biggest conversation happening in Texas right now. And this is the place where we want to break it down for you and give you some context as to what's happening across the state. May God bless you, and may God bless the great state of Texas.
Do you want to get your news from people who share your values? Texas Scorecard, real news for real Texans.